These days, in 2019, you can't seem to boot a game up without being greeted to a large, open world to explore. The sky's the limit, and sometimes it isn't. And with the Battle Royale update, CSGO has jumped on the bandwagon with their very own large, open Blacksite map. I've already made a video talking about its size, and how small it still is compared to others from the genre, like from PUBG or Arma. Source lacks many of the modern graphical effects and techniques that the competition use to craft their worlds. But I'm going to look behind the scenes to show you why, considering the circumstances, Blacksite is a work of art. And then I'm going to ruin it for you by showing you all the flaws. CSGO is still based on the Source engine. Most engines have their roots in the 90s, but Source more than most. It works by splitting every level up into a series of rooms, and then only drawing the ones that can be seen from the one you're currently stood in. This was essential in the 90s, when computers were less powerful, and it suited the games at the time, which were usually a series of rooms. But while most engines have advanced and found better ways of rendering large open spaces, Source sticks to its methods of splitting its level up into a series of rooms. The graphics have been improved, and they've got better at disguising the fact that everywhere's a room, but it still works in the same way. You see this? Is it sky? No, it's just a ceiling that's been given a sky texture. That's why, if you throw your grenades high enough, they'll bounce off it. With CSGO, they've gotten a lot better at disguising this by raising the height of the ceilings, but they're still there. Even in Blacksite, the island of which is just one big room. But this is the problem. If Source can't split the map up into smaller rooms, it has to draw everything at once. And Source doesn't like that. You'd hope that the ground would hide whatever's behind it, but it doesn't. The island of Blacksite is made of displacements, which are bumpy looking bits of floor. It's surprisingly efficient for your computer to draw these, but the downside is the engine doesn't see them as solid things that can't be seen through, so it continues to draw whatever's behind them. Blacksite gets around this by featuring a pyramid. An invisible pyramid, as large as the island itself, but hidden underground. While displacements don't hide what's behind them, these blocks do, and the pyramid acts like one large, staggered wall. It's not as effective as if the map had been a series of rooms, but it means that your vision from one side of the map across to the other is blocked, and it doesn't have to draw anything over there as a result. The island itself is also pyramid shaped, with the middle being the highest up. Had it been the opposite of that, like one big valley, then this method wouldn't have worked, since you'd be able to see everywhere from everywhere else at once. So if you think about it, an island with its highest points being in the middle is the best possible shape for an open world Source map. Although the island itself is like one big room, with an invisible pyramid in the middle, it still features many buildings and indoor areas, and these are places that can be optimised. Blacksite does this by blacking out windows and openings at a distance. Once this is done, it no longer has to draw what's inside, and that includes players. This is one bit of optimisation that I'm a little unsure about, because it can clearly affect gameplay. If a sniper is stood inside, and another player is in the distance somewhere, the sniper will be able to see him, but they won't be able to see the sniper. In fact, in true Battle Royale fashion, it greatly favours snipers, since zooming in removes these blacked out areas. But for the average pleb with a rubbish weapon, they're doomed. The more I looked at this feature, the more difficult it got. There are signs that Valve put a lot of thought into where this happened. Although most entrances that Blackout do so at a distance of 2,600 units, which really isn't that far, and well within the range of the bigger weapons in Counter-Strike, others fade out sooner, and some not at all. Somebody at Valve had to decide for each and every window how it would behave at a distance. That big abandoned building near the sea doesn't black itself up. Maybe because it's so open and visible from a distance, it would have impacted gameplay too much. Maybe there's not a lot to draw inside the building, so it doesn't help too much to do it here. It really is a difficult decision that needs to be made on a window by window basis. Take this house here. All of the windows black out at a distance, apart from the room on the right. Well, this is even more confusing. This is by no means a simple topic. Had they been able to, I suspect Valve would have kept every opening visible. But be it engine limitation or frame rate optimization, they've chosen not to. And this is one area that could lead to unfair gameplay situations. One of the things that has made open worlds possible is level of detail. Rather than to draw everything in high quality as though you're stood right next to it, as it moves away from you, stuff is swapped for lower detail versions until it becomes a simple 2D picture on the horizon. Modern computers have enough power to make this transition almost perfect, but particularly in earlier games, like Oblivion, it's easy to spot the low quality models and the transitions between them. Here, for instance, is a 2D tree that's pretending to be a 3D one. As you run around it, it will turn so that it's always facing you. And here's the transition between low quality 2D model and high quality 3D model. I will admit, I've lowered the settings quite a lot to make it obvious here. It's a lot better with the slider set to high. In an open world game like Oblivion, different LODs are needed to keep the game at a playable frame rate. The props in CSGO, however, don't do this. I'm not sure why not, but I can give you some reasons for why not having different levels of detail is good for a game like CSGO. If you swap a prop for a lower quality one at a distance, there's the risk that it will look different enough to change the gameplay. Say a person is hidden behind a car and it's swapped for a lower quality model. It might change the car's shape and outline, revealing a player who would otherwise have been hidden if still behind the higher quality model. I don't know about you, but I struggle to know how hidden I am on games like PUBG when hidden in grass. At far enough distances, further than this example, grass is no longer rendered, and I hope another trick is used to emulate concealment. Otherwise your character is left exposed and easily visible on what appears to be completely flat ground. Although not perfect, or even very good, the Armour series makes distant people sink into the floor a bit to simulate being partially hidden by grass that is no longer being drawn. Blacksite doesn't do this. If you're hidden in grass, you're hidden in grass. Just look at all of it. This has been a feature in Source ever since Half-Life 2, but I never feel the games have used it as much as it could have been. Until now. Blacksite is littered with this stuff. They're only simple 2D images that spend the whole time looking at you. They don't even try to hide it. This might be why you always feel there's somebody behind you on this map. In general, you won't notice this, but move about them slowly and the illusion breaks. This strikes me as funny. Sticky out grass is generally the first thing to fade out at a distance in games. But here, they remain visible till the bitter end. So, the props in CSGO don't change how they look at a distance, and the grass on Blacksite never fades out. This earns the game some brownie points over the competition. But then it immediately loses all of these, and then some more besides, for fading large things out completely. Props fading out in CSGO have always been a thing, but in normal maps have been reserved to pointless details outside the playable area. Not so in Blacksite. For some bizarre reason, and much like the windows being blacked out from earlier, a map designer from Valve has hand-selected certain props to fade out far earlier than they should do. There must be some kind of thinking behind their decisions, but I can't find one. I understand it on stuff like these pipes here. They're above the playable area, so are unlikely to reveal a hidden player behind by fading out. Plus, they're cleverly hidden from most of the map by these buildings here, which further justifies their fade out distance. Nice. You will notice that most of the details inside the houses are below window height. This is clever since you can't see them fading out too clearly from outside. Nice. But what's the deal with fading smaller trees like this out early? I imagine that some players might use these, thinking that they're hidden, completely unaware that to a distant enemy, they might as well be stood out in the open. This feels like an oversight for a map that has clearly had so much thought put into the rest of it. Don't trust small trees on this map. Though I'm well ahead of you there. I haven't trusted them for years. And what are they playing at with this staircase here? Can you imagine if another game had staircases that randomly disappeared and popped up whenever they felt like it? Okay, maybe it's a battle royale thing. So Blacksite doesn't use different levels of detail, but it does fade some items of cover out completely, and blacks out windows. But perhaps Blacksite's most powerful optimization trick is to use fog. One of the oldest tricks in the book to keep frame rates high. Fog used to be a hated feature in games, though volumetric fog has brought it back into fashion somewhat. But no, this is not that. This is proper fog, pure and simple. Having fog in a battle royale map is kind of odd. In a game like PUBG, so much of it is about stalking players at a distance, or firing shots you know would never hit but you fire anyway and then you run out of ammo and wonder why you did it and then you eventually get one hit kill by the enemy. But in Blacksite, it doesn't seem to matter. The map seems designed to draw you close to your enemy, playing it more similarly to how you would in a standard game of Counter-Strike. Which I guess makes sense, since we're talking about Counter-Strike here. The fog in Blacksite starts at a distance of 1000 units, and ends at 6500. Anything beyond this distance will be fog coloured. I've got the exact colour right here. And then, at just over 7000 units, things stop being drawn entirely. The map relies on its clutter to disguise this, but from the right spots you can still see it quite clearly. In terms of gameplay, you can shoot a rifle or sniper a little bit further than you can see in this map, but with anything else you're restricted to just over half the visible distance or below. You can see all the weapons here, courtesy of Sloth Squadron and Black Retina's excellent weapon spreadsheet. Link in the video's description. Thanks to the fog, you can see just under halfway across the map. This, combined with your limited field of view, means that at any given time you can only see a fraction of what's in the map. How fair is this fog? I tested on maximum and minimum details, and it seems like no matter what your graphics settings are on, it remains the same. So this is good, since it doesn't give people with powerful PCs an advantage or anything. There used to be a bug where you could see further if scoped in, or when viewing things out of the corner of your screen. Valve improved this long ago, back when Hunger Games style maps were popular. But this problem still remains a bit. Take this lighthouse for instance. If stood here, it's not rendered at all. But if you move it to the corner of your screen, it appears again. If you want to see as far as possible, don't look directly at things. All this fog makes me wonder, is it also the reason that this map feels so big? Back before Skyrim, back before Oblivion even, there was Morrowind, and that game had a lot of fog. It made the world feel much bigger than it really was. Once removed, you realised how close everything was to everything else, and the illusion was ruined. Perhaps the same is true with Blacksite. This is what it looks like with it disabled. Decide for yourself. But with all this fog and fading out and stuff, how can you still see distant mountains? This is the 3D skybox. It's a miniature model that's blown up to look a lot bigger than it really is. If I cheat and fly down through the earth, I can find it. People used to have a lot of fun with this back in the day with Gmod, creating gigantic chickens and G-men. But for this map it has been used properly, and all carefully matched up so you can't see where the map ends and the skybox begins. Well, I say that, but I can still see it because I'm great. In fact, it's pretty obvious because the sea texture isn't the same size. It's even worse under the water, where the land suddenly gives way to the blue expanse beyond. This isn't even hard to spot. Simply go to some body deep water, crouch, and it'll be staring you in the face. Valve has done two things to try and hide this. The first is a brand new screen-wide distortion effect that makes everything look super ripply. And the second is to make your character as buoyant as a balloon, floating him to the surface almost immediately. This is only in this particular game mode. You can still sink in all other ones. But I like to think that making you a living life jacket was a desperate measure to hide this glaring flaw in the graphics. But it's probably there to stop people from drowning themselves. Oh, and there's a push block surrounding the island to stop you from getting too close to the map's edge. At least they've toned down their approach a bit. Try swimming in Half-Life 2 and not only are you dive bombed by antlions, but you quickly get eaten by leeches. Valve, you need to chill. Also found within the 3D skybox is the radio and water tower. But these are already found in the level. Why are 2 copies needed? You know earlier when I was talking about the fog and the things fading out? The exceptions to this are these 2 towers. Valve must have decided that these were important enough to be visible from everywhere, no matter how far away from them you might be. Here I've disabled fog and have made the skybox black. Rather than disappearing like the rest of the scenery, they instead turn black, showing that only the skybox version remains. Returning to how the map looks normally, what happens if a player is on this water tower at a distance? Simple. The player disappears, but the water tower remains visible. I don't know why I had to test this, but I did. Despite all these game-breaking ways in which the map is completely broken, I think Valve must be very proud of Blacksite. Despite being stuck with the source engine, they've always dabbled with open environments. Half-Life 2's coastal levels were beautiful at the time. This bit in particular wowed me with its sense of scale and detail, though by modern standards, it now looks painfully sparse. What details there are have been aggressively optimised. And yes, the blacking out of windows was used here as well. Who'd have thought we'd still be using the same engine and techniques 15 years later? Valve continued to improve for Half-Life 2 Episode 2, which ended on a much more detailed, open environment. There were rumours going around that they wanted to go bigger still, filling levels like these with quests and stuff. Maybe the source engine wasn't up to the task, and that's why we never got Episode 3. We will never know, but they've outdone themselves again with Blacksite. It's not as big or as detailed as other Battle Royale maps are, but it's proof that, with enough tricks and shortcuts, Source can still do it. If only just. But if you want to go any bigger, Valve, it might be time for Source 2. And Half-Life 3.